Rape in the Orthodox community is not as rare of a thing as I once thought it to be. Until it happened to me, I just didn't see it. I mean, I knew sexual assault happened, but I didn't know, you know? I wish my story was unique. I wish that it was some kind of freak occurrence or that it had been caused by some undercurrent, a natural flow of events, because then what happened to me would make some sort of sense, but it doesn't. Rape never does. I naively assumed that rape occurs because of something, that the source could be traced to blurred lines or mixed signs or mixed drinks or mixing with the wrong type of crowd. I was worldly, but I subconsciously held the opinion that most non-consensual touch was caused by too much trust or acting in a way that caused others to feel too much lust, and I had been good. There was no reason for me to think that this would or even could happen to me. I had worked hard to guard that which I thought I should. I had seldom allowed my hand to brush another man's, and I had covered my form confident that it was a wonderland, that it was unfathomably sacred. And I fully intended to save it. I never considered that someone would break it. Would break me. After I was sexually assaulted, my mind, body, and spirit actively revolted against everything I had ever known. It just felt so unjust. I watched as my pure copper faith rusted. The situation was disgusting and unfair. I spent months choking on a lack of air that was one man engaging in one act in one night. This wasn't supposed to happen to me. The God that I knew, how could he? The roots of my belief were ripped from the ground and left deep, unfilled holes. But what was unexpected was that the violation of my physical boundaries wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the subsequent fear, the shame, the guilt. Because one of the first responses I received to my share, said with absolute love and nothing but care, was, just don't tell anyone. Keep it in therapy because people can be cruel. Don't give them a reason to have anything to say about you. And I understood. And I was quiet. After all, I wanted to start no riot, and I was raped is not a cool fun fact to share at a speed dating table. That advice reflected a communal truth. Many things are better left shoved under the table, should remain in the land of whispered fables, and kept out of public knowledge for as long as one is able. Because rape is a horrible thing for a woman to be associated with. Especially a religious woman, especially a single religious woman, God forbid. There was the rabbi who specialized in cases such as these, who I called asking for a friend. And his final comment, freely gifted to me confidently and conscientiously between confidants. He said, your friend probably isn't as religious as you've been led to think. There is judgment. It may not be based in justice, but it just is. And while clearly a body's history is select few people's business, and honestly, I'm inclined to keep this life event off of online vistas, it is vital for us to acknowledge that this is something that happens. Rape happens. I am sitting here sharing, bearing a soul and body that need no more bearing, because we need to become aware of this hidden, glaring truth. We need to speak about this. There is a problem when there are topics that no one brings up in conversation, not because of a desire to keep private things private, but only because the revelation might be met with condemnation and consternation and feelings of degradation and humiliation. There is a problem when experiences are left unspoken, not due to active choice, but due to fear of being seen as irreparably broken. There is a problem when silence is chosen solely because our voices are trapped under a crushing tower of fear of the response of others. It is a problem because it is literally impossible to heal from something that we won't admit has happened and is happening. Orthodox women get raped too. I hope to God that it has never happened to you, but I know for a fact that it has happened to other good, balanced, astute people in your life. Knowledge leads to discussion, and discussion leads to change, and it is far past time for things to change. I am many things, but I am not naive. Religious or not, some people will gift no reprieve from judgment. I know that some will decidedly believe that what happened to me means that I am tainted. Some will say she must have created an opening. No matter what I may say about my journey since that day, some will now see my name and picture me in a certain way. I know that this may limit the men I date, or rather the men who will be willing to date me. And I'm more than slightly terrified at the fact that my public image will shift in others' eyes, that people will craft a narrative about my perspective and life and surmise things that I know to be lies. But the time has arrived. The time has come for us to write and speak. I haven't spoken, but now necessity has woken me. For the past few years, I've somewhat stopped writing, and it's not that I was hiding. It's just that I was fighting to survive the breaking, the making it through every day, and facing and processing that shame. I have received the sentiments. Are you sure it was rape? Are you sure you didn't miscommunicate? Are you sure it wasn't just your version of a bad date? 2 years later, I met the man who violated me, and we talked about that night. If he could admit that it was non-confusing non-consent, why can't we? I firmly believe that everything happens for a reason. Not because of a reason, but for one. And while I would never choose my assault, this is a chapter of the magical novel that is held in the vault of my experiences. My rape is a part of what crafted me. It did not stain me and make me dirty. It changed me and made me sturdy. It was an experience that forced a shift. It caused deep self-analyzation and facilitated the creation of who I am today. An empathetic, communicative, grateful being who does not shy away from saying what needs to be said, whether it is yes or no. Those words no longer stay in my head. Instead, I endeavor to live by example and teach young women and men to speak and listen. This is my new mission. I hold no more shame surrounding my rape. It wasn't intentioned or asked for. It was just a part of my fate. And that shame, there isn't room for it in my life. I am too full of joy and purpose. I don't have the time or the emotional bandwidth to devote towards reserving space for this emotion of fear. It no longer belongs here. My rape happened. Non-consensual sexual acts happen both in our community and out, and they occur regardless of how people do or do not dress, regardless of how much people do or do not flirt or caress, regardless, it is happening. We need to craft the world we desire to live in. A world in which survivors feel safe from derision, a world in which respect for their stories and selves is a given. A world in which those who have experiences can feel directed and driven to utilize this in forging new paths. And after surviving the initial aftermath, can take what happened and integrate it into their post-apocalyptic chrysalis, and eventually open new wings and fly. Those who are engaging in intimate touch need to have knowledge of just how much lack of consent can adversely impact a life, of how much their actions matter. We need to start engaging in discussions surrounding boundaries and personal power. We need to pay attention to learning what consent sounds like. But there is no conversation unless we start speaking. My rape has painted my life in an unexpected hue. I now live more consciously. My faith was reaffirmed anew. I grew up. I grew deeper. I remember the first time I told a date that I had been raped, afraid that he would immediately stand up and say, "We should go, it's getting late." But he just sat there and fought to hold back tears, and my worst fears were not realized. I have more to say, but I'll leave it for another time, for another poem, for another day. Not everything needs to be spoken all at once. But I am decisively sharing this here and now because I firmly believe that people must hear and know that these things happen in every social circle, in every social setting. It's not just a back alleyway kind of thing. It's not just contingent upon whether or not your clothes are revealing. Rape happens when an individual makes an active choice to disregard the voice of another human being. None of us should ever feel alone. We need to talk about how it is possible to rebuild and renovate the astoundingly beautiful home that is your body and your mind. Please, treat yourself kindly. You have a voice that deserves to be heard. You have a spirit that deserves to be seen. There is a need for us to shut up the silence and start to speak.